and welcome to this very special episode of the PolicyBazaar show. Joining me today will be an insurance industry veteran, one of the most respected names in general insurance, Ritesh Kumar, the CEO at HDFC ERGO, which is one of India's leading general insurance companies. Most financial planners will tell you that the first thing you do when you make a financial plan is to protect your health. Now, how do you go about doing that is what I'm going to talk to Ritesh about today.
I'm Ritesh Kumar. I work for HDFC ERGO. I've been working for the last 27 years in the financial services space. I moved over from banking to insurance in 2000 when the insurance sector opened up to the private sector. I think there's a wonderful opportunity that insurance has. Insurance was just sort of opening up in the as a sector. The penetration rates in India are extremely low. There was a tremendous opportunity to grow for this. HDFC, as we all know, is a great financial services brand. And here was an opportunity to really sort of go out and create and build an institution, build insurance within that.
It's wonderful meeting you, Ritesh, again, and welcome to Gurgaon, welcome to the Leisure Valley, and there's so much to talk to you about. In the last, I think, 10 years, so much has changed in the insurance landscape, and we're going to talk about that walking through this beautiful park. To take people through what to expect from the insurance sector in the coming few years. Ritesh, we're going to talk a lot about health insurance today, but before that, you've been looking at the general insurance space for almost 2 decades now. So much has changed. Where are we headed when you talk about the overall general insurance space?
You see, 20 years back when sort of private sector was allowed in the GI space, the insurance penetration on the general insurance side was just about 0.6 of the GDP. Over the last 2 decades, we've made significant strides. We are today, the penetration has moved up to about 1%, which basically means that a 10,000 crore industry next year should be touching about 2 lakh crores. So there's a significant stride that we've done. Having said that, our penetration rates are far lower than what they are either, when you want to look at it from an Asian context or when you want to look at it from a global context, we are still half of what the penetration in Asia is. So still a long way to go.
Talking about health insurance, Ritesh, increasingly financial planners are advising people that even before you begin investing anywhere, the first thing you've got to do is get yourself protection for your health. Is that a thinking change you're seeing? Because again, when you talked about penetration of some of these protection related products, health also perhaps is very, very low in terms of penetration as far as India is concerned. Is that changing?
No, what you're saying is absolutely correct. Things have changed. If I think of the situation in 2000, the total health insurance market at that time was just about 1,000 crores. We've actually been able to grow 50-fold since then. The health insurance space today is a 50,000 crore piece. Having said that, if we look at the number of people who still go out and buy a retail health insurance, it's still about 3.5 crores. So even if we were to sort of go out and say that 20% of India's population is really something which is able to buy a retail health product, we are still talking in terms of a penetration rates of just about 10% and thereabouts. So still a long way to go. But having said that, yes, penetration has moved up.
But tell me something, when you talked about age and how that's important, how getting in early into a health insurance plan is important. Can you tell us a little about that? Because there are a lot of young viewers out there who probably feel that I'll do this later. Right now I'm in good health, I'm fit, I have energy, I have no disease. Let me do it in my 30s or let me do it in my 40s. How important is it to get into a health insurance plan probably when you're in your 20s and have just started working?
See, I think it's very, very important to start early. A lot of people think the way that you've just described, and you've described it perfectly. You see, what is important is that health covers, there are sort of clauses wherein all covers do not start immediately on somebody starting an insurance policy. There are some waiting periods, there are things, so what happens is if you start early, health insurance is something which unfortunately people are going to need. And by the time you sort of get to use it, by that time your cover is absolutely everything is up and running there. And all parts of the policy are things on which you can sort of make a claim. So it's very, very important to buy early. The other thing which happens is that, supposing I decide that I want to start late, and unfortunately before that there is an event which has happened. It will lead to a problem because insurers will no longer be willing to give you a policy because it will be an anti-selection. So it's very, very important that people not only sort of start buying early, they start buying adequate. They do that with the right disclosures.
You were talking about adequate, Ritesh, and that's my next question. What is the adequate amount of health cover that I need? Because one looks around and sees people with a few lakh of cover, and maybe that worked 20 years ago or 30 years ago. But one point that we don't emphasize that much, perhaps as much as we should, is the fact that health inflation, we look at the CPI number and we feel very happy that it's under 4%, but health inflation continues to grow in double digits. So what is the adequate amount and why should I care about, health inflation?
See, on a worldwide basis, the health inflation is typically something which is between 1.5 to 2.5 times the normal inflation. So when we talk in terms of the current inflation numbers on a general basis of about 4%, the health inflation is more about 10%. So what is happening is that the cost of healthcare is increasing. Over and above that, lifestyle diseases are increasing. The protocols on treatments are changing. You have more sophisticated surgeries which are happening. So all this is adding to the health inflation per se. And therefore, so one of the big dilemmas that we've been facing is that while on one hand we talk in terms of a particular penetration, but if you were to really sort of go out and look at the extent of insurance that people have, there is a significant amount of underinsurance. So a lot of people within these the 3.5 crore people who have a health insurance policy have covers of 2 lakhs, 1 lakh, maybe 3 lakhs, and this is really inadequate. Today we are talking in terms of a fact that the health covers at a bare minimum need to be a 5 lakh, and really, if you and I want to feel sort of adequately protected, we are really talking in terms of a cover upwards of 25 lakhs, and that is what a real sort of value is. Having said that, a lot of people don't have insurance, and therefore they need to start at a point. I feel that point is 5 lakhs, and that is where a person can start and then build upwards.
Do you think a good strategy therefore would be that you start with, say, a 5 lakh cover and then top it up every year or every second year as your income rises? Is that possible? Is that a good strategy according to you?
According to me, probably that is the best strategy going forward. If you have money, sort of start at 10, start at 20. But otherwise start at 5 and keep topping it up every second year and sort of building upon it, because you are going to need much more. Because 5 lakh is not going to be adequate as we move forward. Even under the Pradhan Mantri in the Ayushman Bharat scheme, there is a 5 lakh cover which has been offered to the to a family. And if that is the cover which is being offered there, we really understand what the meaning of a 5 lakh cover is.
So, tell me one thing, from the last almost 2 decades of, the private sector coming in, how have the costs changed for a consumer? Have they actually come down with competition, with best practices being adopted? And if you could take us through some of those changes that as a company you've done to make it a better experience for a consumer. But costs, have they actually come down over the years?
So the cost of a health insurance policy is really dictated by the medical inflation. So to that extent, costs have only been increasing per se. But what has been done is that there is a fair amount which has been done on the side of analytics. There has been a fair amount which has been done on the side of digitization. And if I was to just talk in terms of, as an industry, we've probably always used analytics. How do you price if you don't use analytics? But there's been a lot which has been happening on the side of predictive analytics, predicting what a buyer's behavior is going to be, a buyer's behavior at the time of buying a policy, at the time of buying additional covers, what happens at the time of renewals, the fraud propensity. So that is one area wherein analytics has been used. The second area where analytics has been used increasingly is in terms of pricing and segmentation. But there's a fair amount of potential. You can't charge a standard price to someone living in Delhi and charge the same price to somebody living in a village.
Sure.
I mean, the prices need to be different. So analytics, there's been a lot happening. On the side of digitization, again, a lot has been happening. I mean, this has been in terms of the entire buying behavior. I mean, from a situation wherein people would fill in manual proposal forms to today, everything being in a digital form. I mean, the entire buying journey has significantly been reduced as a consequence. So what would take days earlier on, today can happen in a sort of in terms of minutes, and that is how the entire online journeys sort of become more pronounced. What has been happening today is that basis analytics, we are able to, I mean, a big pain point has always been asking people to go in for health checkups at the time of policy issuance. We've actually been able to significantly reduce that through tele-underwriting. So that's something which has happened. The other thing which has happened is that the entire process, even where a health checkup was required, today a potential policyholder or an agent of ours can actually sort of do a booking for a diagnostics, sort of sitting in the room. The diagnostics can then send the entire data back digitally. This goes into a rule engine. And I mean, there are triggers of accept, reject, or a manual underwriting, and the entire process can really be condensed. So what would take days earlier, today is actually able to happen in 3, 4, 5 minutes in some cases, wherever there is a medical intervention required, and slightly longer time. But the entire experience is something which has totally sort of undergone a change. The other thing which sort of significantly makes a change going forward is what we call the connected devices. I mean, so today what happens is that, I mean, we are seeing those changes in motor, we are seeing those changes in health, because with all these variables that we have, I mean, this actually now goes forward to essentially sort of see as to how is it that we can give better sort of policy servicing to an individual, whether it is also in terms of the entire ability to reduce their premiums on renewal. So you go to a gym, you sort of run every day in a lovely park like this, your premiums can be lower than somebody else who's sort of leading a sedentary lifestyle.
Ritesh, one of the issues which has been turning people off, if I may say so, is the whole claim settlement process. So if you look back at when you started off, you had a situation, it could take you months to get your claim after you had been hospitalized. Then of course we had the whole TPA system that evolved, didn't work out. Now of course most of the private sector and the public sector companies have moved to a cashless situation. Can you tell us a little about the evolution of the claim settlement process and how simple has it become now, if you could tell our viewers that?
So see, there was this time when somebody would be hospitalized, thereafter they would go out and sort of lodge a reimbursement claim. And you're right, I mean, that was something which would take a long time. Now this is something which has really changed. And today, I mean, hospitalization and cashless, they go hand in hand. And so there is a greater propensity for people to sort of claim under a cashless hospitalization, which basically means that when somebody walks into the hospital, either for a planned intervention or for an emergency intervention, you go out, reach out to the TPA or reach out to the insurance company and get a cashless approval, which really sort of then, I mean, you don't have to pay anything, things are instant. So that's one of the things which has happened. The other thing which has happened is that even when somebody was earlier applying under a cashless, what would essentially happen is that when a cashless request would come, and I mean, in our parlance we call it an authorization letter, which would come in, it would actually takes hours. In which point in time, I mean, the relative of the patient would be restless because he either needs to go out and deposit money to the hospital or otherwise. Now that's something which has significantly changed over the years. We are today in a position as a company wherein when a cashless request comes in, instead of manual processes, these are things which are coming over the portal. So the data is coming in more accurate and in a more digitized form. I mean, we are able to sort of put it through some automated or analytics driven queuing. And we are today actually in a position wherein it takes us on an average about 12 to 13 minutes to approve a cashless. Now that's a long way from when, I mean, we used to take 3 hours, 4 hours. Sometimes averages don't tell the story because, I mean, that's what statistics is all about. we are actually even able to do a 90th case in say 22 minutes, or for that matter, the 99th case in less than an hour. So that's really something which has over a sort of period of time really gone out and significantly changed. Because at the end of the day, when you're selling a policy, it's a promise. The claim is a moment of truth. And if there is pain at that point in time that people are not getting their claims or things are getting delayed, or it's not only about the claim, it's also about the liquidity. Everybody doesn't have the liquidity to go and deposit a huge amount of money to an hospital.
Sure.
So that is really what sort of we are seeking to change. I think as an industry, we've come a fair way along that. There's a lot more which is needed to be done, and what is really needed to be done is that I think the hospital systems need to talk with the insurer systems, better, and that would actually go a long way in terms of further simplifying this.
One of the other pain points, if one may say so, for people, Ritesh, is that taking a health cover involves a lot of medical tests and lots of checks and stuff like that. Now, while logically that shouldn't be a problem because it's always good to get your health checked, but I think people feel that it's a hassle. How have things on that front evolved?
So there are two things which have really sort of happened there. So what we noticed was that this was actually becoming one of the biggest points wherein things were getting delayed. So there's been action on two fronts. We've tried to see as to how do we reduce the number of people for whom we require a medical test. And what we found was that if we were to move over to what we call a tele-underwriting, and this would help. So what we have is that we have a team of doctors who then do a call with the policyholder, take certain questions, and what we've seen is that this has significantly reduced the number of people that we need to sort of push for a medical test. So that is one. The second is that you would still require medical test for a set of people, and what we've tried to do is that we've also tried to in a lot of places, and this does help more in metros, I dare say, that we've actually sort of started sending the diagnostic center people to the home. So you have a pain point in terms of going to the diagnostic center. Okay, we send the diagnostic center to you, and that's something which has helped. The third thing which has helped is that this was also leading to a lot of time delays, because what was happening was that it would take a lot of time for somebody to essentially get into the diagnostic center, the whole process of fixing an appointment, cancellations, finally going there, and then the entire process of getting the report back, and the insurance company then going out and doing the underwriting. What we've done is that we've sort of automated sort of portions of this. So today, the diagnostic center, so you're fixing the appointment literally online on a tab. Okay, we're sending diagnostic centers home the moment the report is ready, it's actually coming in a digital form right into our underwriting system, and in a lot of cases there is an automated decision which is happening. So what this has done is that this has significantly reduced the time that it takes, sort of for the entire process. Having said this, I think obviously it's very, very important to go in for these medical tests, and this is really something, there are these substitutes on tele-underwriting and stuff, but this is really something which, yes, we know that people shy away from it because they don't really want to know the truth about themselves, but this is really something that we should also be encouraging.
Right. Let's talk a little, Ritesh, about product and how that has evolved over the years. From being a product that you had to stay overnight to get any benefit, have things moved, to daycare procedures, for example. If you look at OPD, that's one area where bulk of the healthcare costs go to, and yet traditionally it was never covered under your health insurance policy. Similarly, there are disease-specific covers today. Can you tell us a little about the product portfolio, and what do you think a consumer should be looking at? It shouldn't just be one policy. Probably, if you have a history of a particular disease, for example, should you be going in for a disease-specific cover? If you could take our viewers through the journey.
To start with, the product which was there was the conventional hospitalization product. That somebody who needs to get hospitalized on an overnight basis, and that is what the cover would provide. over a period of time, there have been a lot of developments which have happened in health insurance. So if I was to sort of talk in terms of them, a lot of covers have started getting covered, which are basically the day procedures. So today, if you have to go in for a cataract process, you don't need to be hospitalized overnight, or for some of the oral chemos or some of these processes. So the list of covers where a hospitalization policy sort of answers or responds to, even if the process is a day cover, and those processes have, the list of those processes have increased over a period of time. So that is clearly one. The second thing which has happened is that there are 2 or 3 kinds of covers which have come into being. A lot of benefit-based critical illness covers. So, what you were alluding to was that if we feel that, you're scared about a heart disease or about a cancer, and you know that these are diseases in which greater amounts are spent, so you buy a disease-specific cover with higher sum insureds. The third kind of cover is basically hospital cash, wherein you actually sort of go out and say that for every day of hospitalization, you get an X amount depending on the cover that you're buying. And fourth is more, some of these vector-borne diseases or these dengue covers which are there. So these are really sort of the umbrella of covers which are there. Having said this, I think what a person definitely needs to, what is a good product bouquet, or what does an individual need to have in his armory? The base hospitalization cover, there is absolutely no substitute for that, and that is something which necessarily needs to be the first product that a person should buy. And then he can sort of complement or supplement this with trying to buy a top-up cover to increase the sum insureds, or trying to buy disease-specific covers or some of these hospital cash covers. But again, there is no substitute for the comprehensive health insurance cover per se. There was one more question which you asked, which was in terms of the day procedures. See, my take on this is that an insurance cover is really for things which are low frequency but high severity. So it doesn't happen every now and then, but when it happens, there is a large sum of money that gets impacted. If you look at an OPD, it's basically the absolute opposite of this. Very, very high frequency but low severity. So it's in a manner of speaking, it is basically just a exchange of money which is there. So I do see that under the Indian scenario, a OPD cover, it will still take a lot of time to develop. And if we were to add to this, that this money swap, the economics get further impacted because there is a tax element and also the fraud element. So I do see that this cover will take some more time to get into its own. But all the other forms of cover should be there. Please buy a comprehensive cover first and then supplemented by any of these niche products.
On that positive note, thank you very much, Ritesh, for joining me here today. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and hope to see you soon.
Pleasure likewise, and I do hope that sort of through the medium of this show, we are able to sort of get people thinking in terms of, on buying insurance and if they are buying adequate insurance.
Well, that was Ritesh Kumar, CEO of HDFC ERGO, talking about general insurance and more specifically on health insurance. Well, if you've heard him well, what you need to do is go out there right now and get yourself a health insurance. It's worth it.